Tonight, we're very fortunate to have a sponsor, and I'm going to bring David out from Custom Knives to say a couple words. David?
Thank you. So firstly, I'd just like to say a big thanks to the organizers of the Global Bushcraft Symposium. Done a great job, really enjoyed being here, and I think we can all agree this is something that we're going to be talking about for a long time to come. And I just wanted to say quickly, really proud to be a sponsor and to do my little bit to make this thing happen, and to be able to support this kind of thing. Quickly about my company, we make knives. I started the company in 2007, and the goal was right from the beginning really to make great knives at achievable prices. So if you want to have a look at what we produce at the moment, there's a little table down on the right hand side after the talk where you can have a look and see what we do. And at the end of the presentation or the panel discussion, Lars is going to draw one lottery ticket, and there's going to be a Lars Felt knife. That's a collaboration between Castrom and Lars Felt. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you, David. Thank you so much. So first of all, I feel very, very humbled and honored to be sitting here between some people that I would call my heroes in this, or my mentors, and it's been a very good privilege to be here for the GBS and then being asked to do this job. So I'll just tell you a couple things about myself, and to give a bit of context as to why it was very important for me to sit here and facilitate this. I'm a sergeant in the Royal Canadian Air Force, outposted at Cold Lake, Alberta, and we teach cold weather survival to the pilots, air crew, technicians at Four Wing. So being able to draw on this expertise, and then especially the times that we've had Moors come out to Cold Lake and be in the field with the Four Wing Ground Search and Rescue team, it's meant a lot. So well, that's enough about me. I'm John MacArthur, and I think that unless you guys have been hiding under a rock for the last couple days, I think you know the other people sitting here with me. So of course we have Mr. Morris Kohansky, wilderness living skills and survival instructor extraordinaire, and a mentor to a lot of us on this side of the world and around the world. We also have Mr. Juarez Vaults, a former Swedish Army survival instructor. He instructed, or he was the commander at the survival unit there in Sweden. And he was one of the driving forces in the organization of the 1995, or I could say he was the driving force of the 1995 First International Survival Symposium in Sweden. And then of course we have Mr. Tom Luchins here to my right, your guys' left. And he was a USAF pararescue survival instructor in the United States Air Force. So one of the things here, you're probably looking at the table or the arrangement we have here, we have an empty seat with a mic. One of the things in Discovery, we have the instructors that were there. Well, what's good of having an instructor if you don't have a student or somebody that's coming to listen to what you have to say? So when I was in Sweden last year and attending some of the festivals there, I was very fortunate to meet somebody that had attended the 1995 symposium. And he's actually here today. So I'm going to call him up here to the stage, because without having the students, it's very hard for instructors to teach. So if I could have Mr. Johan Skolman come up to the stage, that would be great. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. So as you can see, we have a great group here, and now without further ado, we'll just start working through some of the questions that we have prepared, and hopefully really be able to give you guys a better insight to how the 1995 symposium affected where we are today, and going forward from there, what the future is going to look like. So my first question, I'm going to come over here to Lars, is going to be, what was your objective in the organization of putting that first survival symposium together? Because every soldier has an objective. They know what their mission is and they're going to accomplish it. So I'm curious is, what was your objective? And the second part to that question is, did you feel you met your goals?
I have been training survival for 20 years when it was 95. And I have been around in America, Canada, and England, and all over Germany, and all over the world. And when I did survival courses there, I talked to them and say, you think we can meet in the future? And many of them say, okay. And then when I invited all the people, most of them come to north part in Sweden, up in Juarez, and that's quite long up. We're going to show some pictures here after, so you can see. And when we have that course a week with people from defense, from all countries, many countries, Canada was there, America was there, and all in Europe was there. And the first weekend, when we instructor was there, we have also a course for civilian people, because we like them also to see that we should teach. And they have to pay for that, of course, so we get money. Then we can have that for the traveling for all instructors. And then there was one of these civilian guy, Håkan Strotz. He started survival training in Sweden after that, and he invited Mors again. So he came to his place, not far away from where I live. So we met again in a couple of years later. And I think it was very important, and I tell them also too, you can arrange a course. And after a couple of years, they have a course in Britain, but that was not so good. And they was just talking a little bit, but not teach anything. And so I did the last course, 90 before I get retired. And then we have that in where I live in Karlsborg. So I think that's a good idea to have international courses. I like it very much.
Thank you so much, Lars. One of the responsibilities as a moderator is to make sure that you follow the schedule, and I have to apologize. One of the first things I was asked to do was get the pictures shown, so if we could get the pictures up so we can have a quick discussion about those.
All the people, can you hear me? All the people who was on the course, and over you see there is a Finnish guy, Turk Altonen. He couldn't come here. He has been training survival his whole life, and he's same age as me, and he has never worked. And he don't pay any taxes, so he cannot fly. He has no money now. And then we have a colonel who was a chief, and he was not there. And then we have the owner of Jukkasjärvi, he's still owner. And then we have a major, a doctor, Boman. And then we have America, Mel DeWeese, also an old survival instructor, but he didn't come here. And then we have a Same. And then we have a man who worked for me, Christian Lindberg. And then we have a general. And then we have Tom Lucian, Sean McBride from Australia. And did I say your name? There is Moskahansky. Down there. And Ingvar Holmér, a professor. And Per-Ola Granberg, a professor. And then we have Norrit, major, and he was commander for the dog patrol, very famous. It was in up in the real north in Greenland. They was driving the whole winter up there, dog patrolling. So he was chief for that. So that was the instructors who was there. And next picture, we see all the people and all the who come from the different country. So we take one of these pictures. and it's difficult to see who is who. And here you can talk about Sandy.
Well, Sandy Bridges was a scout leader. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Oh, all right. Well, I don't want to. So Sandy Bridges was the director of the Northern Tier High Adventure Base, which is the Boy Scouts' largest canoe outfitter in the world, actually, and winter camping outfitter in the world. And I worked for him in the 60s when I was guiding canoe trips, and then he had a opportunity to put together a 50th anniversary celebration of the Paul Seipel and Admiral Byrd expedition down to Antarctica. That happened in 1928, and in 1978, he had Moores and Lars and myself and a whole bunch of other people that I can't remember, Arthur Ofterheide, who was on the Plaisted expedition, Pozos, Dr. Pozos, who was a preeminent doctor in Duluth on hypothermia, quite a few other people that, Bob O'Hara. Bob O'Hara spent the last 50 years paddling down every known river in northern Canada to the ocean. He was there. Anyway, there was a lot of people that came, and Moores and Lars and I got to meet at that time. And so we kind of credit Sandy with giving us the ability to know each other, because he had the vision. When he first came up with the idea, Sandy was quite the innovator, and he had taken a few trips to Sweden and to Finland, and he had learned a lot from Lars and from Turka, I believe. Is that true? He met Turka in Finland, and he went to Rovaniemi, and he spent a lot of time in upper Finland and Sweden, and he fell in love with the place. And when he was developing the winter camping program, he used all of your work, all of Moore's work, all of the Air Force survival work in Alaska, all of the Vunky work, all of the circumpolar ethnology type information, and he put the program together. He used everything that he could to make it a successful program. Anyway, that's Sandy Bridges. He's no longer with us, but I'm sure he's enjoying this.
Thank you so much. Now, I've got a question for Moores. I've discussed this with him before. I was sitting around his kitchen table a few times about this, and it was part of the genesis for me last year to go over to Sweden and link up with basically Lars's, students of Lars's, and I was very lucky to have Ewan Forsberg to take me under his wing and take me over to Sweden and show me around. But one of the questions that I want you guys to hear the answer to is this. So Moores, that trip that you took in 1995 over to Sweden, what was one of the greatest things that came out of it for you, like long term?
Well, I sold a lot of books. Bushcraft was very popular. I got accustomed to eating fish for breakfast. Pickled herring. I enjoyed, there was an ice castle that was finished by the time we, well, maybe it wasn't finished, but we used a part of it. So there was a bar, a chapel, places where people could sleep and have the experience of living in an ice castle. I think there must have been 150 military survival instructors at the time, and every snowmobile, like the snowmobiles would pass through 100 snowmobiles, and everybody was Japanese sitting on those snowmobiles. And a Japanese decided to have a wedding, to be married in that ice castle. And they hired a Lutheran minister to do, and he carried on as if it was normal weather. By the time he finished with the marriage ceremony, I could hear the bride's teeth chatter loudly because she was wearing a bridal gown that wasn't like, she should have been wearing a parka. But the fellow, the husband-to-be, he came outside and he says, if you'd like to attend my wedding, well, everybody was standing around and decided all of them filled the church. So he all those military survival instructors in their uniforms and everything filed into the church and took up, I think probably lasted a couple hours for the ceremony. What I loved about, there's a kind of a conveyance that is like there were carts that you could push, and you pushed with your foot, and when you wanted to slide, you stood on one of the it's like a big heavy skate, probably it was 8 feet long. I almost killed myself because I found that I'd had to get used to the fact that I better not get enough speed just in case I wouldn't be able to stop. But I went out of my way to use those conveyances for a while. The time of year was that at noon, if you looked hard enough, you would see a faint glow on the southern horizon, which was the glow of the sun. So all of the all the street lamps were on continuously because it was that sort of dark. And we were so close, I think, to the ocean that at a certain time it poured and rained. It got rather balmy, although there was a lot of snow. It poured and rained for a while. I tried to meet a lot of people that were involved with the research in the design of clothing, because Sweden was probably further ahead than almost any other nation with regard to research in military clothing, maybe for being active in Arctic regions. But the moment that I sidled up to some of the specialists, I couldn't pin them down and ask the questions I wanted because they had other thoughts about how to enjoy the conference. One situation that I found is Tom Luchens put on a slide presentation of the development of the history of survival training in the United States Air Force. And Tom had previously stopped on his way at my place for a while, a week maybe if I remember right, when he was moving from Alaska to the western seaboard there. And so he knew where I lived. And on his slide, I looked at the slide and it shows North America and it says Chip Lake. Well, Tom didn't realize that we were just a half hour from Chip Lake. He had the opportunity to take pictures and everything. He never realized how close we were where the United States Air Force had their first survival school that was established an hour and a quarter west of Edmonton in this ferrying of the planes from the States to Alaska. And they had a corridor, I understand. There's a lot of crashes that occurred. So there's a museum in Edmonton, if you're interested, to see the stuff that was picked up when the airplanes crashed. The Americans had some kind of arrangement to provide these planes, but international law, I think, dictated, if I got my information right, you couldn't fly it from the States into the Canadian, into Canada, over the Canadian border. So they would land near the border, and they would use horses to pull the airplanes over the Canadian border, and then took off again. And then Edmonton probably was the next stop, and off they went to Alaska. And there may be a significant cluster of planes, but only one navigator. So if the plane with the navigator crashed, there was the rest of the planes, they either, I don't know if that ever happened and how they would solve that problem because they didn't have the navigator. Anyway, so that result, someone in the American system decided that they needed a survival course for the people that were ferrying those planes, and it got established at Chip Lake. And of course, I would think that the RCAF sort of, I don't know how active, I remember, I think the RCAF established survival courses after that. And I think what was done at the United States Air Force schooling and survival training had a big influence, I think, on what the RCAF ended up doing. But anyway, I ate very well, in particular the sauna phenomenon. I think that's the right way to say it. Instead of sauna, we say sauna. I do sauna. And you fry your brain, and then you come out and you eat all kinds of goodies. And the guy that ran the sauna was enormous because I think he tended to eat the leftovers or whatever. But that was quite an enjoyable experience because it was co-educational, but the women dressed and undressed in their quarters and the men did that, and then we all meet and experience the very traditional social event where you drank and ate special sauna type food. The Canadian, there was an officer and two sergeants showed up at that event, and they didn't know who I was. They were like, the survival school moved to eastern Canada somewhere, and so they realized that here's this Canadian that they didn't know was representing Canada, and they knew nothing about, and they were engaged in the survival training of the RCAF. I don't know if I'm answering the situation. Well, I hobnobbed with all kinds of people with high status, in particular Raymond Mears and Mel Deweese and Sean McBride. It's kind of exceptional. That was in 1995. I still remember all that. And then Tom, I think, did you not share the accommodation with me in a kind of a, I think if I remember.
You and I were roommates.
We were roommates.
And I remember the funny thing that happened. I said, Morris, this is really cool. And you said, no, this is heaven. And he says to me, I said, no, you're really right. This is really cool. He says, no, you don't understand. He says, we can talk about survival from the time we wake up to the time we go to bed. And our wives aren't there to tell us, Morris, they don't care. So it was heaven. I mean, now you ladies don't take that wrong, but
There's a summer girl who wants to sing for us. You remember that, the summer girl?
Oh, yeah.
She also go to the sauna with us.
Yes, yeah.
And we have 3 women in the sauna who go with us, all the instructors, in the end of the course. And then he was afraid, Tom, Don't take any pictures, so my wife say that.
I remember that I think we were there about 15 days. And I think we probably, if I remember right, we had about 5 mess dinners. And if you weren't careful, of course, you could get extremely drunk. You had to pace yourself. And I learned that there was these little bottles of schnapps, whatever you call it. And I noticed that the younger guys, they weren't tough enough, and they were sort of neglecting their schnapps. And I said, if you don't want to drink your schnapps, well, there was a row of about 20 bottles, and I slowly kept pace and so on, and found that all the young guys that weren't tough enough to be able to drink the schnapps, that I could accommodate them. When there were, it was the civilians that came in the mess dinner. When they were done, then the military came. I think the first time, all of us, Tom included and Mel DeWeese, we had an equivalent of a mess dinner to welcome us there to that program. Anyway, the situation was very intense. There was a van full of us, and the driver broke the speed limit and got fined by the Swedish police. So we chipped in and paid his fine, but he wouldn't have. He's Christian. Yeah, he's Christian. Yeah. Well, anyway, we realized we hadn't done any shopping. The community that Kiruna, is that? Sure, yeah. The city, a mining town where the highest quality ore in that part of the world was to be found, and so on, for the reserve for the highest quality steels. So a day or two before we were to leave for home, we went shopping in a crafting supermarket. And by then I had accumulated an enormous amount of Swedish money. And I went crazy. And all I did was fill a normal shopping bag full of things. And I didn't pay much attention about the money that you could reclaim your money at the airport if you weren't a Swedish citizen. So the taxes on what you pay, and it never twigged on me how much money I had spent to fill that bag. So when I came home and started to take the items, the gifts and everything, and my wife looks at a price on the bottom. She says, "What's this figure mean?" And it was a wooden, traditional Swedish or northern a drinking cup out of wood, and it said 225 on it. And I said, "That's 225 crowns." And probably crown was like 4 crowns to the dollar. I think I must have, well, if I do the math, I probably saved $75 for this little wooden cup. And then I added up all of the other items I had in that bag, and it was over $4,000 Canadian. So they were beautiful gifts, but I didn't realize I'd spent that much money. Well, to go a little further, I'm going home. I worked in this community about 5 hours north and west of where I live, and I noticed I'm driving through a community called Valhalla. Well, you can just surmise that who were the settlers that settled that region that they called Valhalla. And I was driving along and I saw a garage sale sign, and it was kind of a long driveway, and I turned in just to have a break. And what I saw on the sale tables in that garage sale, I immediately grabbed a bag, and just like a whirlwind, I started throwing. I wasn't bothered throwing, because the Swedish trinkets and everything that were on that table. I think I might have matched the amount of money, the amount of value, but it was like 25 cents or 50 cents or so on. So probably for about $20 now, I bought these old ancient things that were very, very Swedish, which I knew the value, but I realized that I better not let anyone get ahead of me, and so I found that that really added to my collection of Swedish things. People, when they visit, Lars has got this many books.
Okay.
My mic is stopped. Lars has got this many books in my library. Then I have this many Swedish books in my library. People often ask, do you read Swedish? Well, I say, good pictures, so I don't really have to read it. There's references.
All right, so I really appreciate the stories more. So another perspective, remember we were saying there's instructors and there's students. I was just wondering if Ewan could take us back to those days there and maybe some of the courses or classes that had been run and what you took from those.
Is this one? Yeah, it works fine. My reason for going to this instructor symposium was simply that a couple of years before, was in the second class of the survival instructors course. And Juarez was the place where we had our winter part for the first number of years before it became too touristic and they had to move it. And at that time I was also responsible for everything that had to do with protective clothing, and soldiers carried equipment. And of course it was a huge amount of excitement to go to an occasion like this with some of these guys we didn't know, but we were a bunch of quite young. I had been in the service for 15 years at that time. But still, we were a number of survival instructors that came there with quite high expectations, and I would definitely say that they came through with the potential of 10 times what we could expect. We did actually talk and breathe survival all days long, and I would actually say that we used some parts of the nights also. So it was quite intense. And there's also a saying, you should know that, guys, that what is happening in the sauna academy of Jukkasjärvi stays in the sauna of Jukkasjärvi. And perhaps that's the best thing. The days were actually filled up with really good workshops. It was a mixture of indoor classes and then, of course, with excellent winter conditions, as it was already in December. We had very good workshops outdoors also, of course. And I would say, looking back at my 30 years in the military service, I retired in 2010, this is definitely one of the highlights, and it became one of those occasions probably that inspired us as at least young survival instructors to go on, because it was the best thing we actually could do, spend time in nature. It was our favorite occupation, simply. And the years that came after this became very strong connected to this happening, I would say. And that also made a lot of us more interested in following up these guys and what they were doing in their different countries and so on. simply became a huge inspiration for us all.
Well, that's awesome, Johan. I just kind of want to expand on that a little bit, and I'm going to turn to Tom in a second. But what I was thinking was, as I was listening to you, and you were reiterating a lot of the same kind of thoughts I had in my head about today for what we're doing, and the sharing of knowledge, and being able to live, breathe, talk, survival, bushcraft here. And there's just so many people. And it takes me to one of the things that Don Cavellis was talking about the other day, and it was about how good does something have to be to become, good. And he relayed a story to us about he worked with a photographer one time, and he had asked the photographer, out of all those pictures you take, how many do you need to take to make it to a magazine? And he had said, well, I take roughly about 2,000 pictures, and one will make it into a magazine. And that sparked a whole lot of other kind of thoughts and into the talking about there's a lot of things out there that we see that are really good, but how many bad ideas or how many bad shots of pictures didn't make it, right? So coming back, and I guess what I'm trying to reel in here is with what we're doing here right now today, how does that link into what you guys did in 1995?
Well, 1995 was the first one, the inaugural meeting. And we actually had one in 98 in Yeovilton in England, which the British Navy sponsored, which was excellent. And then there was one in 2000 again back in Sweden. And that was the last one until today, this week. And I would say that it seemed to me that we were able to establish communications between, was it 15 nations were there? Sorry? I think it was 15 nations, right? Yeah. Pretty much all of the free world. And so if you can establish communications and share the knowledge peacefully, I mean, there's going to be discussion, of course, about, well, what about this and what about that, and differences of opinions and tweaks here and there. But the generality was that we were trying to share the information of how instructors could teach better and could use simpler techniques to get complex things across. And I think that it's been successful. It hasn't been very public because I know, I don't go on the internet very much, but I was told to go somewhere and look at this, what do they call it, on a discussion page, on a forum, and look up this organization, International Association of Survival Instructors. So I did, and they were saying, the people were talking back and forth about, what in the hell is it? Is this organization? We never heard of this. What do they do? Who are they? Where are they? Blah, blah, blah. And I don't know how to answer those things, so I just read it. And I thought, well, that's interesting. But it didn't seem like it was huge publicity. There wasn't a lot of publicity about it. It was kind of a low key, and maybe this meeting here that we're attending will help to make it more publicized. Maybe that's not the right word. Maybe just so we can continue to share information peacefully and help everybody raise their abilities to do the work.
Okay, so just as we're getting closer to near the end, and we're going to grab a couple questions from the audience. But before we do that, I'm just going to give this panel here just an opportunity. Is there anything that you guys would like to bring out about the 1995 symposium, to share? Maybe something I missed. Is there something that you guys would maybe want to bring out?
I don't think so. We, under that Symposium 95, we was out in the forest quite a long time, and we have some lectures in the beginning, and then we was out the full day and coming back again with snow machine. So that was good when you was out with the people, because you can talk to them in a good way.
Morris, any last words?
I'm overwhelmed, so I trying to say something relevant. No, every one of these events I've enjoyed, and I was always treated like royalty, and so on. And let's see.
Awesome. Tom, is there anything, last words?
The only thing I would like to say about this organization that seems to be alive still, I think it's important that we all are willing to share information with each other and to try to raise the level of the ability of everybody that we touch to do the things that we value and to continue to educate and to propagate the things that we stand for with this survival, bushcraft, emergency preparedness, all those things that Lisa talked about in her great presentation today.
Johan?
I would like to point out that the major difference from 95 and today is that today it's a completely different possibility of actually sharing and reaching out and inspiring others on a quite solid ground like we have been experiencing here these days. So I think it's because even in those days it created a very strong bond among the Swedish survival instructors, and we started already after those days to be closer in contact and sharing. And then I believe actually that this specific week became a driver of the further progress and development of our survival instructors going into other types of environments. And at that time, things changed for us also. So we started to have deployments for most types of environments that we can actually experience on this planet. So I think that is something that's very good to bring on to a symposium like this, that we perhaps can have a kind of variation of locations and environments to simply learn more.
And Tom just wanted something.
My memory isn't as good as it should be, and I was trying to think of the correct words. I want to thank Morfar Overlevned.
Right?
Yeah, it's correct.
Morfar Overlevned. For those of you who are not Swedish, that means Grandpa of Survival. Lars Vault for making this first time happen.
My grandson is very good. He's now 15 years, and when he went to school, he was not so good. And then they was out to school in the forest, and they should make food, and they couldn't start the fire, the teachers, and he went down there and started the fire directly. But he didn't say that when he come home to his mother. But when she was there, and they talk about how he was in the school, and they say, he's perfect. He started the fire in 2 minutes, and then it's burned, and then they say, he can go, no problem with him.
Okay, so like I said, I promised you a chance to do a couple of questions from the audience. I'm not sure if there is any questions, but if there is, I'll ask you to walk over here. Let's get in this queue here. So do I have anybody, any takers? Are you just getting up? Are you coming over? All right, we got one taker.
So, with all of the instruction that you did, have you heard of cases, instances of military personnel that have actually benefited and that came to you and told you of some experience because of your training?
What we say?
I have. Do you I can tell one or two.
I actually have one too.
Oh, well, you go first.
Okay. So as an experience for me, I'll tell you, and this is a little bit light, but the situation was pretty heavy. And I had recently, give me a sec. I'd recently had finished my courses at Karamat, and I was now starting to do the campy bit, and we had a crash in Cold Lake. And we lost one of our pilots. And our team had to respond. We had to go up into the air weapons range, and we had to do the work. And it got cold, folks. It got really cold. Ted Dar, that's here, he was out there with us too, but it got cold. And it went from 0 to minus 52, and we were tasked with building a survival camp just off the crash site so that we could take care of the investigators. So I'm trying here, because I'm sharing with you guys as a family. It's something that still ticks away in me. But I'm trying to get onto the lighter side of it. And really, one of the things that was really, really beneficial to us out there was our ability to make coffee that we learned at Karamat, and the way that Moores told us, because we were out there, it's cold. We didn't have anything. We had a few pieces of canvas between us and the cold. We had to make a fire on the ground. We just didn't have the resources, right? It happened so quick, and we had to get out on the ground and do the work. But the skills that we had picked up from doing this stuff really, really made a difference for us out on the ground. So that's just my sharing, but I'll give that to Tom.
You know, all of you have probably thought about this. When we teach, we are teaching life and death skills. And when you have a student come to you, it's very wonderful, and it makes you, it gives you purpose again when they tell you words like, "You saved my life." Student came to me after he had crashed an airplane in Alaska, and all he could remember after the crash was, "Maintain body heat, maintain body heat, maintain body heat." He said that's what he chanted to himself, and he says, "I could remember things then after that. Oh, wait a minute, maintain body heat. Oh, the windscreen was broken." So he put something in front of there. And he says, as soon as I remembered, I mean, he's in shock. I don't know, how many people have ever been in a wreck? In a bad wreck where you were darn near unconscious? Yeah, you're in shock, aren't you? Yeah. All survival situations start with the patient, the survivor, in shock. Bang! Oh, crap. You know? And so the ability to click into remembering mode of what you've been trained in it happens because the training is so good. Well, anyway, he said, I knew I was going to survive when I quit saying maintain body heat, because he had the yoke of his airplane. Maintain body heat, maintain body heat. But he knew he had an airway, that was good. But the blizzard was blowing in a broken airplane. And he said, as soon as I took something and stuffed it in the hole, he says, I knew I was going to make it. And then 3 people died in the back of the airplane that wasn't his fault. The airplane crashed. It was weather, and it was halfway between Galena and Nome. But at any rate, he said, I knew what I had to do, because I just did it. And another time happened, this is a long time before that, but it's similar. Roger Locker was, some of you saw his picture today in my presentation. He was an F-4 pilot in Vietnam who crashed 40 miles west of Hanoi, and he was on the ground for 23 days. And the thing that he remembered was when he hit the ground in North Vietnam, he said, it didn't bother me a bit. He says, I was scared and I was concerned, but he said, it looked like, it smelled like, it felt like the Philippines where our training area was. And he says, oh, I've been here before. So when you do training, it's got to be realistic, it's got to be relevant, and you got to remember it.
Okay, on that note, I think we're had enough of this discussion for one night, and we're going to turn this back over to David and Christian to do some draws. So I'll just ask my guests, Moores and Tom and Ewan, to please exit the stage, and Lars is going to stay up here for one of the draws.
So our first raffle item, I'm going to pass the mic to David to let you know what it is. And Lars is going to pick the lucky winner.
Okay, so we've got a castrum knife that is designed in collaboration with Lars Felt, and yeah, it was something that we created as a result of the Bushcraft Festival 3 years ago when we met for the first time and started discussing knives and yeah, so let's hear the lucky number.
0110.
0110. Jag vill presentera den.